My name's Tyson Vandenbroek. I'm a musical artist and composer, and today I'm going to talk about the creative decisions, inspirations, and design choices that all came together to make the Deep Blue EP. If you've ever been curious about my creative process or how I write my music, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. And in addition, I'll dissect each song in the EP and talk about specific parts. If that interests you, stay tuned because we have so much content, we have to split this video into two different parts. And at the end of this video, I have a super cool announcement regarding the shirt I'm wearing and how you can get one for yourself. Anyways, here is part 1 of Deep Blue Behind the Music. Today, July 10th, marks 1 year since Deep Blue was released. I like to call Deep Blue my first major musical project because it was my first EP and it took a lot of work and planning to do. It took about 5 months total of hard work, but I'm super proud of the end product and it's one of, if not the coolest creative projects I think I've ever done. And for me, I kind of have to be inspired by a topic in order to put so much work into it. The music I write is heavily inspired by the games I play, the movies I watch, and of course, the music I listen to. For Deep Blue, some of the main inspirations were the video game Raft, the movie Luca by Disney and Pixar and the score by Dan Romer, the video game Abzu, and the music from The Godfather. Now, I'll talk more about these inspirations while we go through the songs, but Abzu was really the main inspiration for the EP. Throughout the EP, you'll hear small elements that are inspired by the Abzu soundtrack, and even small details like the cover art and the song names are heavily inspired from Abzu. I found Abzu for free during a game sale, and I immediately fell in love with it. The type of music and the environment really just resonated with me, and I think I actually started writing the EP that same day. Even the song names in the EP are separated by commas, like A World, Unexplored, or Beneath the Surface, At Peace. This is a small detail from the names of the Abzu soundtrack, and I thought it was super cool, so I thought it would be really cool for me to do it myself. Now, I had been fascinated with the ocean theme for a long time. For me, it seemed like such a diverse canvas for the type of music that I like to write. Now, if you don't know me or if you're unfamiliar with my music, I like to tell stories throughout the music that I write. Whether that story is through a simple idea like Marvel or Stay Here, or whether that is about 9 Russian hikers that mysteriously vanish in the Ural Mountains in Russia like Diablo. So for EPs and albums, I like to pick themes that have a lot of potential for storytelling and themes that can convey a diverse set of feelings and emotions. Not only is the ocean a perfect theme for the music I write, but it also pairs beautifully with the orchestral instrumentation that I started working my way into around this time. Drifting Away was my first real attempt at this theme, but since then I knew I could do more with it. And around that time, I wanted to start experimenting with more EPs and albums rather than just singles. And I thought the ocean theme would be the perfect first EP. Now that we have a little background for the inspiration, let's start to dissect the tracks themselves, starting with track 1, A World Unexplored. So immediately, we're in this place where this pedal tone is going to continue throughout the entire piece. This piece is in C major, and all of the pieces except one of them are in C major. And this beginning part is just establishing this feeling, and it's establishing this call and response with this melody passing from a vibraphone to a Glock to a piano. So you have this beautiful, these underlying strings that are just floating in this lower register. And then this call and response from this violin, and you have this Glock voice, and then you have this upper flute voice. It's just floating in this upper register. Introducing a harp voice. And then this harp leads us into this first opening hit, where now the strings aren't just in the background, they're kind of in your face. And then this part right here is actually pretty neat. So you have this part where the choir and the lower strings and upper strings are sustaining this chord, and then all of a sudden this lower register of this chord just stops, and then you're left with these upper voices, these violins and this flute just sustaining the top of this chord, and then immediately the bass comes back in, and then you get this full sound that sounds really freaking cool in my opinion. And then we begin to back off at this point. And this section is actually really important. So far we've had this kind of beautiful feel and this beautiful environment. It's all open, it's kind of ethereal, and it's really free-flowing. But this part is going to serve as an interjection, and it's going to be built on way later in the EP. So this part is one of the first parts that's heavily inspired by Abzu. So you have these voices that were first introduced, and they're sustaining a chord, and then they start to pull back, and you get this kind of underlying melody with this kind of lower flute voice than what we were introduced to. And you have this really prominent choir voice. Now, Abzu, the OST has a lot of choir, and I really wanted to capture that in this EP as well, because I think it really applies well to this ocean theme. So once all of these voices kind of draw back, it really gives a perfect moment. It kind of sets the stage for this choir to really shine. And at this point, you have this harp voice that's really just arpeggios that are, it kind of gives this quarter note or half note feel depending on the way you listen to it. And it really just builds this kind of texture, it adds a little color, and this will be prevalent throughout every single song in the EP. It's this very minimal harp voice that are just these arpeggios, and they build, and then eventually, in this case, they crescendoed with the other voices and along with the choir into a big hit. Once again, this call and response voice. The choir and the strings are just roaring at this point. Now that melody, I'll let it finish first. And then you're left with this vibraphone voice that kind of provides a little bit of closure, but not that much. So that last voice in the violins and flute, the last melody you hear, right here. And then the strings continue to crescendo. So this melody, pay attention to it, because it will be built on throughout the EP, and it will be revisited at the end of the EP. So really, this piece kind of introduces the key and the theme, and it builds on this feel. A World Unexplored is definitely the fan favorite track. Its purpose in the EP is to establish this free-flowing, ethereal, kind of open kind of feel, and to foreshadow this mysterious aspect prevalent throughout the EP. In this track, you, the listener, are exposed to this beautiful open landscape full of life and color, but you still don't know a lot of things. You still haven't discovered everything there is. And this is built on even further in the next song, As Waves. So we're immediately in this different place, but we still have this kind of environment. You've got this supporting violin voice that's really low and really quiet. And then you have this piano voice that's really simple. It's really just quarter notes. And this is one of the things that's heavily inspired by the Raft soundtrack. So if you've ever listened to the Raft soundtrack, it's really kind of simple music, but it has a really prominent piano voice that's just really simple melodies, and they have a lot of reverb, so they kind of ring out. And this will also be revisited in the 5th track, but for now, it's kind of moving us, it's kind of a transition into the actual part of the song. So it's serving as a transition in between these two songs, and this is the first time you're introduced to this kind of whooshing sound with the violins. So this will also be revisited throughout the EP, and in my opinion, it kind of reminds me of like a current or waves passing by, or just things passing by. So you're just exploring this environment, and then you get these really kind of high and exposed violin voices that start at nothing, and they crescendo, and then they pull back. So once again, we have this passing voice from the flute and violin, with just this underlying strings are just supporting. It's almost like these two instruments are just calling back at each other. And then here's where the choir really starts. You really get to hear it. It's really a supporting voice in this part. And then this part is very different, but whenever I hear this part, it kind of just reminds me of you're in this current and you're just seeing all these things pass by you, and you're just looking around at this beautiful landscape. You have this harp voice that's providing a quarter note pulse. You have these swooshing or whooshing kind of violin voices underneath, and then obviously you have this triplet feel in this flute part. So now is when these kind of lead parts start to pull back, and you're just left with the underlying kind of supporting voice of the lower strings. There's not really any melody here. You're just supposed to kind of take it all in. And then the flute comes back. And then it kind of ends, once again, a little mysterious, not that much resolution, but it will lead straight into the next song. In this last part, after the kind of underlying strings, after that main section, you have this weird part where whenever the flute comes back in, you have this weird amount of space in between these phrases. Now, in my opinion, I love incorporating space into the music I write, because when used correctly, it can be really freaking cool. Even just a quarter note rest sometimes can be the coolest thing ever. It's kind of like the absence of writing is sometimes cooler than the writing itself. So I wanted to kind of have these kind of pauses in these phrases just to kind of emphasize this kind of mysterious, it's a little bit unsettling, but it's still, at this point, it's all overshined by beauty. And throughout the entire piece, there are crescendos and decrescendos in the lower string voices, kind of like waves. This is a really dynamic piece. Actually, the whole EP is really dynamic, and I wanted that kind of cool correlation between the actual title of the song and the way the parts move together. As Waves plays with more musical ideas and continues in building this beautiful environment, it further establishes this call and response that will be revisited throughout the EP, and it further establishes the free-flowing theme with the mixed time signatures and the instrument voicing. These first two songs build the idea that you, the listener, are becoming more tied to this environment. You're still overwhelmed with the beauty, and you're beginning to form this relationship to the environment, which is the main idea and will culminate at the end of the EP. But the beauty can't last forever, and all of a sudden it fades away and you find yourself in the midst of the void. So immediately we're in this new feeling. You've got this piano part, and you can already almost tell that it's in a different key, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So you've got these whooshing sounds again, that I like to call them, and they're still the same voicing, but now they're kind of unsettling almost. And you have this, that's actually a gong crescendoing into a bass drum decrescendo, that kind of weird kind of whooshing. And then if you listen closely, you can hear once again that harp arpeggio. It's got kind of a half note feel, but it's kind of offbeat. And it doesn't really go with any of the voicing. Once again, we have this choir voice that's kind of, it's really the lead here, but once again, it's not beautiful, it's kind of unsettling. So this part is actually pretty cool. So right there, that last section is really cool because it's got lots of weird meter. That harp voice is actually a 5-tuplet over the course of an entire measure. And then you have some parts in the choir, in the soprano voice actually, some parts during this 5-tuplet actually have basically 6 notes in a 4/4 bar. So you have these really overlaying, this kind of polyrhythm that's not really, they're not really calling to each other. It doesn't work, but that's the point. It's supposed to kind of make you feel uneasy. And I love using these kind of mixed meter and these weird kind of 5-3s and, and 7s. And I love using these because even if you don't really know what's going on in the music, you still kind of feel this weird offbeat kind of part, and it just makes you kind of feel that this isn't right. It doesn't really sit right with you. So this harp tremolo is actually one of the things inspired by the Godfather soundtrack. It's really prevalent throughout that soundtrack, and it can be used in a variety of different parts. It can be a lead, it can be like within the lower strings and kind of just provide support, which also does happen later on. But right now it's kind of the main voice. And then you have this tremolo thing happening in the underlying string voices as well. And then the choir leads us to the main hit. Still a call and response, even from this lower register. And it just keeps pushing on. See, this melody is just being passed on from voice to voice. So this part is really, you're in this dead zone, kind of. So you go from this beautiful, in the first 2 songs, this beautiful environment, and then you find yourself in this zone where, in the real world, parts where the ocean is, you get so deep and it's so dark and like anything could be around you, really. And at this hit part, where it's really loud and all these voices are like just screaming out, kind of, and they're really like passing this melody along, this is when you realize that this void is full of life. And what this dead zone, or what you think is this dead zone, is actually turning into a place full of life, but it still doesn't sit right with you. Once again, you have this harp voice. It's kind of the main melody. Once again, those lower strings carrying that same melody. Then everything fades out. And then you get this piano voice, that's same as the beginning of the song, with these same kind of whooshing violins. Then it closes just like that. So there's a few things in this song that are kind of unique. There's actually an instrument called a cuica, and it's not really an instrument that I've had a lot of experience with, but it actually traces back to Wondered, which is another song that I wrote probably about a year ago from now. Now, Wondered has this cuica voice, and it's kind of unsettling once again. It kind of takes you by surprise. And in this EP, or this song specifically, it's used just to add to the environment. It could be some creature down there in this dead area, or it could just be the screaming out. But really, it just adds this texture, and it's got a lot of reverb. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's just add it in. The Void is a major turning point in the EP. Now, beauty replaces itself with mystery and uncertainty. So I kind of wanted a song that interrupted this flow of beauty. The Void is such a major turning point because it revisits this beauty, but afterwards, this beauty doesn't sit as well with you. You are exploring this environment once again. And at the beginning of the EP, you're introduced to all this beauty, and it's just amazing. You're looking around at all this life, and it's so colorful, and you've got this beautiful environment. But then the Void kind of changes your mind about this. And these next few songs will kind of play off of this feeling. You're not going to think the same of the ocean anymore after you've visited this kind of place. This is the only song in the entire EP that is in a different key. All of the songs in the EP are in the key of C major, and this is in the key of F major. I wanted a different kind of feeling, and really, you don't have to have something in a different key to accomplish a different feeling. Some people think major keys sound happy and minor keys sound sad. And to a certain extent, it's right, kind of, but it really just depends on the context. In some contexts, a major key can sound sad, and in some contexts, a minor key can sound happy or inspirational or triumphant. It really just depends on this context, and I didn't want to write this piece in C minor. I wanted to have a different type of feel, and I also didn't have to put it in F major either. But F major really worked with this key center, and it really sounded nice. It sounded like a different feel, but it also is reminiscent of some of these old melodies that were revisited, because the only difference between C major and F major is one flat. I mean, obviously they have different tonic notes, but in this kind of context where you have these revisiting melodies, it's just slightly different, and it's enough for you to realize without actually, like having to really listen to it. Okay? So in my opinion, I don't think you need knowledge of music theory to write something that sounds good. Now, music theory in relation to writing music has been a major topic, especially online. There's a lot of controversy around it. And actually, when I wrote this EP, I had almost no knowledge of theory. It wasn't until late last year that I actually learned a little bit of music theory. In my opinion, if it sounds cool, then just do it. People get caught up on having to know everything about something. So if they don't know anything, they don't try it. And in my opinion, it's okay to be afraid to do something, because that's how you learn. Throughout this EP, I learned so much about theory and what sounds cool and voicing and everything. If it sounds cool, there's probably an underlying reason why that you could relate to theory or you could relate to math, but in my opinion, I don't care. I'm just out to make it sound as cool as possible. I actually watched a interview with Jacob Collier recently, and he said something that I thought was really cool, and it relates to this really well.
It always begins with being curious. You can't begin with being an expert. It's like there's this funny myth that you need to somehow know what you're doing, but people who know what they're doing don't make interesting work. It's just as simple as that.
And I couldn't agree more. Honestly, you see all these artists and people in different fields that have no idea what they're doing, but they make really freaking cool work. Some of my favorite music comes from indie games or games by either single developers or just a few developers. And usually these songs and these OSTs are not made by really famous, really talented musicians and composers. They're made by people like me and people that only have a little bit of knowledge about theory, and they're just doing it because it sounds really cool. And they're really passionate about what they do, and that's what makes it sound awesome. The moral of the story is you don't have to be an expert on something that you love. I say do what you want, be creative, and if it's cool, that's what matters. It's the Deep Blue anniversary, and I had to do something special to celebrate. That's why, on top of this documentary, I'm excited to announce that we are now selling Deep Blue themed t-shirts and stickers online. The shirt designs are based off of shirts that I love wearing, which are really simple shirts, usually with little designs on the front and a large design on the back. Currently we offer 3 shirt designs, all of which have the EP cover art on the back and differing designs on the front. The one I'm wearing right now is my personal favorite. The shirts come in 7 different colors, they're really comfortable, and I purposely designed them to not be over the top. There are also several assorted stickers with the shirt designs and EP cover art as well. I'm super proud of the designs, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. To celebrate the Deep Blue anniversary as well, all merch items are 25% off today, July 10th, and tomorrow, July 11th. Now, if you don't miss this first kind of sale, don't worry, because all items will be 20% off the 12th through the 17th, so you have an extra week to get it if you want to. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment below to order. And that's it for part 1 of Deep Blue Behind the Music. If you've made it this far, that means you probably like this kind of content, and I have good news because part 2 goes over the remaining 3 songs and even more information specifically about my artwork and my process. Click the link in the description or on screen now to watch part 2 of Deep Blue Behind the Music. Thanks for watching.